The great chamber buzzed with voices from 847 different worlds. Creatures of every shape and size filled the massive seats that curved around the speaking platform. Some breathed air, others floated in water tanks, and a few existed as pure energy behind force fields. This was the Galactic Council, the most powerful gathering in known space. Ambassador Hyunwoo Park sat with his small team in Section 43. The seats were designed for beings much larger than humans, making him and his people look like children in adult chairs. Beside him, Soo-min Lee checked her translation device for the third time that morning. Behind them, Jin-Ho Kim watched, the other delegates with careful eyes. The humans had been part of this council for 37 years. Since the day the great ships appeared over Earth, humanity had worked hard to prove they belonged here. They built hospitals on alien worlds. They grew food for hungry species. They fixed broken machines and solved problems others could not. They did all of this while being called a Class 3 civilization. Class 3 meant primitive. It meant backward. It meant they were lucky to be allowed in the same room as their betters. Council President Veltar rose from the center platform. The crystalline being stood 12 feet tall, its body catching and throwing light in patterns that hurt human eyes to watch. When Veltar spoke, its voice rang like breaking glass. The council will now hear the new resource allocation requirements. Veltar announced, all member species will contribute according to their classification level. Hyunwoo had heard this speech before. The council loved its speeches about duty and service and the greater good. But he knew what was coming next. It was always the same. Class 1 civilizations will provide scientific research and advanced technology, Veltar continued. Class 2 civilizations will provide raw materials and manufacturing capability. The chamber grew quiet. Everyone knew what came next. Class 3 civilizations will provide 40% of all planetary resources to fund the Greater Galactic Defense Initiative. This includes all food production, mineral extraction, and manufactured goods. The contribution is mandatory and immediate. 40%. Hyunwoo felt something cold settle in his stomach. Last year it had been 30%. The year before 25%. Earth was already struggling to feed its own people while shipping food to 12 different worlds. Around the chamber, other Class 3 species shifted in their seats. The Denari looked worried. The Kolthans whispered among themselves. But none of them would speak up. They never did. Soo-min leaned close to Hyunwoo. Sir, that will mean food rationing on Earth, possibly famine on the outer colonies. Hyunwoo nodded slowly. He had run the numbers on the flight here. 40% meant choosing between feeding human children or alien worlds. It meant shutting down research projects that could advance human medicine. It meant accepting that humans would always be servants, never equals. Furthermore, Veltar continued, Class 3 species will provide labor for construction projects in the core systems. Each world must supply 10,000 workers for a minimum term of 5 years. 10,000 workers, slaves in all but name. Jin-Ho Kim leaned forward. His hand moved slightly toward his sidearm before he caught himself. Old habits from his military days. Ambassador, he whispered. This is beyond acceptable. Around them, other human delegates waited for Hyunwoo's response. Sarah Chen from the Science Division looked sick. Marcus Webb from Trade Relations was shaking his head slowly. They all knew what this meant. Hyunwoo thought about the message he had received that morning. It was from his daughter on Earth. She was pregnant with his first grandchild. She had asked if Uncle would be able to visit when the baby was born. Uncle Jin-Ho had been away on council business for 2 years straight. He thought about the farms on New Sol Colony that could no longer grow crops for humans because they were too busy feeding the Altarian refugees. He thought about the human, doctors who died treating alien diseases while human hospitals went without supplies. Most of all, he thought about yesterday's conversation with Veltar. The council president had called humans useful primitives who should be grateful for the chance to serve their betters. Useful primitives. Hyunwoo stood up slowly. The movement was quiet, but in the vast chamber it seemed loud. Other delegates turned to look at the human section. Veltar's crystalline head tilted toward him. "The human delegation wishes to respond?" Veltar asked. There was amusement in the alien's voice. Hyunwoo said nothing. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his translation device. The small machine had been his constant companion for decades. It allowed him to understand and speak with hundreds of different species. Without it, he was just a human, making sounds that meant nothing to most of the galaxy. He placed the device on the desk in front of him with a soft click. The chamber grew quieter. Delegates leaned forward to see what the human was doing. Next, Hyunwoo removed his credentials. The official papers that gave him the right to speak for Earth and all human colonies. He set them next to the translator. Finally, he reached for the Terra medallion. Every human delegate wore one. It was a small blue circle with the outline of Earth's continents. His father had given it to him when he first joined the diplomatic service. "Remember where you come from," the old man had said. "Remember who you serve." Hyunwoo placed the medallion on top of the papers. Sumin understood first. She stood and placed her own translation device on the desk. Then her credentials. Then her medallion. Jinho was next. Then Sarah Chen. Then Marcus Webb. One by one, every human in the chamber stood and placed their devices, papers, and medallions on their desks. The chamber erupted in confused voices. Species demanded to know what was happening. Some laughed, thinking it was some primitive human custom they did not understand. Veltar's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Ambassador Park, what is the meaning of this display?" Yunwoo looked at the council president. For 37 years he had answered every question, followed every order, and accepted every insult with diplomatic grace. Not today. He turned toward the exit. "Ambassador!" Veltar's voice was sharp now, angry. "You will explain this behavior immediately." Yunwoo kept walking. Behind him, Sumin and Jinho fell into step. The rest of the human delegation followed. Their footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet chamber. "You cannot simply leave," Veltar called after them. "The council demands an explanation." The humans reached the great doors. Hyunwoo's hand touched the control panel, and the massive barriers began to swing open. Cool air from the corridor beyond flowed into the chamber. "Ambassador Park," Veltar's voice was desperate now. "Return to your seats. We can discuss the resource requirements." Hyunwoo paused for just a moment at the threshold. 846 alien species watched him in silence. 37 years of service. 37 years of being called primitive while keeping their civilizations running. He stepped through the doorway without looking back. The doors closed behind the humans with a sound like thunder. In the chamber beyond, 846 species sat in stunned silence, trying to understand what had just happened. They would understand soon enough. Captain Jae-sung Choi was loading medical supplies onto his cargo ship when the message arrived. The new soul sat in the docking bay of Kepler Station, her holds full of antibiotics bound for the Zephyrian colonies. It was routine work, the kind of supply run humans had been making for decades. The message came through on the emergency channel. High priority. Eyes only. Jae-sung had to scan his retina 3 times before the computer would unlock it. The text was short. Operation. Homecoming is now active. All human vessels will cease current operations and return to human space immediately. No exceptions, no delays. Confirm receipt and comply. Jae-sung read it twice before the words sank in. Operation Homecoming. He had heard whispers about it in the officers' mess, but nobody really believed it would happen. It was the emergency plan, the one they hoped never to use. He looked out at the docking bay where alien workers were still loading his ship. Zephyrian children were dying of a plague that only human medicine could cure. The supplies in his cargo hold could save thousands of lives, but orders were orders. "Computer, send confirmation of message receipt," he said quietly. "Then plot a course for Earth." 3 hours later, the new soul undocked from Kepler Station. The Zephyrian loading supervisor sent frantic messages asking why the cargo ship was leaving. Jae-sung did not answer. He had been ordered to maintain radio silence. As his ship jumped to hyperspace, Jae-sung saw other human vessels doing the same thing. Cargo ships, passenger liners, research vessels, and military escorts. All of them heading home. Dr. Yoon-ji. Han received her message while operating on an Altarian patient. The surgery was delicate work. Altarians had 3 hearts, and this one's primary heart was failing. Without the operation, the patient would die within hours. Yoon-ji's hands were steady as she worked. 23 years of practice had made her one of the best surgeons in the galaxy. Alien anatomy held no mysteries for her anymore. She had saved thousands of lives that other doctors said were impossible to save. Her assistant read the message. Aloud. Emergency recall. All human medical personnel to return home immediately. Continue the surgery, Yoon-ji said without looking up. I'll finish this operation, then we pack. Doctor, her assistant said carefully. The message says immediately. No exceptions. Yoon-ji's hands paused for a moment. Through the observation window, she could see the patient's family waiting. They had traveled across the galaxy to bring their father to the human medical station. They had sold everything they owned to pay for the trip. Computer, how long until this operation is complete? She asked. Estimated completion time is 6 hours, 47 minutes, the computer replied. Yoon-ji looked at her patient. Then she looked at her assistant. Send a message to the medical board. Tell them Dr. Han will comply with the recall order in 7 hours, not before. The assistant nodded and left to send the message. Yoon-ji returned to her work. 6 hours later, the Altarian opened his eyes and asked for water. His family wept with joy. Then Dr. Han packed her tools and left the medical station forever. Engineer Min Ho-jung was building a space station when his orders came through. Not just any space station, but a massive orbital habitat designed to house 2 million Zephyrian refugees. The project had been under construction for 3 years. It was supposed to be humanity's gift to a species whose homeworld had been destroyed by solar flares. Min Ho stood in the construction bay, looking at the half-finished station through the transparent aluminum windows. The main ring was complete, but the living sections were only 60% done. Without the habitat, the Zephyrian refugees would have to stay in the overcrowded temporary camps on Titan 7th. His communication device beeped. Emergency message. All human construction crews to abandon current projects and return home. Sir? His assistant, Bo-ram Yoon, was looking at him with concern. What are your orders? Min Ho thought about the Zephyrian children he had met last week. They had drawn pictures of what they hoped their new home would look like. Bright colors and happy faces, the way children always drew the world they wanted to live in. Begin shutdown procedures, he said finally. Seal all completed sections. Transfer the construction codes to the Altarian engineering team. Sir, the Altarians don't understand human construction methods. Without us, they'll never finish the habitat. Min Ho nodded slowly. I know. 2 days later, every human worker had left the construction site. The half-finished habitat drifted in space like a broken promise. Governor Bo-ram Yoon had the hardest job of all. New Busan was a mixed colony, home to humans and 6 different alien species. They had lived together for 15 years, sharing resources and building a community that worked. Her recall orders were specific. All human personnel and their families were to evacuate immediately. They could take personal belongings, but all infrastructure was to be left intact. Bo-ram called a meeting in the colony's main hall. Humans sat on one side, aliens on the other. The division had never been so obvious before. I have received orders from Earth, she began. All human citizens are to return to human space within 72 hours. The alien representatives erupted in confused voices. The Denari colony leader stood up, his feathers ruffled with distress. Governor Yoon, what is the meaning of this? Has Earth declared war? Are we under attack? Bo-ram shook her head. No war has been declared. This is a voluntary withdrawal. Voluntary? The Altarian representative's voice was sharp. You built the water purification systems. You maintain the power grid. You grow 60% of our food. How is this voluntary? Boram looked around the room at faces she had known for years. These aliens were her friends. She had attended their children's naming ceremonies. They had celebrated human holidays together. The Galactic Council has classified humanity as a Class 3 civilization, she said quietly. We have been asked to contribute as primitives. We choose to withdraw as primitives. But the colony will collapse without human infrastructure, the Denari leader protested. You cannot simply abandon us. We are not abandoning anyone, Boram replied. We are leaving behind everything we built. You are welcome to maintain it yourselves. The Altarian representative's face was pale. We don't know how to operate your systems. We never learned because you always handled the technical work. Boram stood up slowly. Perhaps you should have learned. The next 3 days were chaos. Human families packed their belongings while alien neighbors pleaded with them to stay. Children who had grown up together cried as they said goodbye. Friends became strangers overnight. Some aliens offered to pay the humans to stay. Others threatened to report them to the council for abandoning their posts. A few simply stood and watched in stunned silence. On the final day, Boram stood at the spaceport as the last human transport ship prepared to leave. The Denari colony leader approached her one last time. Governor, please reconsider. We can work something out. Maybe the council will change the resource requirements. Boram looked at him sadly. The council has had 37 years to treat humanity as equals. They chose not to. Now we choose to leave. But where will you go? Human space is so small, compared to the galaxy. Boram smiled for the first time in days. Maybe it won't stay small. As her ship lifted off, Boram watched New Busan shrink below her. The lights of the colony looked beautiful from space, like stars scattered across the planet's surface. She wondered how long they would keep shining without human maintenance. Not long, she suspected. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on 1,000 different worlds. Human doctors closed their hospitals. Human engineers shut down their projects. Human farmers abandoned their fields. Human teachers left their classrooms. Some aliens begged them to stay. Others offered bribes or threatened punishment. Most just watched in confusion as the humans quietly packed their belongings and walked away from decades of work. The withdrawal was not violent. There were no dramatic speeches or angry confrontations. Humans simply left, taking nothing that did not belong to them and saying very little to anyone. Within 2 weeks, every human in alien space had returned home. Behind them, they left empty buildings, silent machines, and a growing sense that something important had been lost. The galaxy was about to learn just how important it had been. Trade Coordinator Rixnall stared at the report spread across his desk and felt something close to panic. The numbers made no sense. Interstellar trade had dropped by 60% in 5 years. Ships were lost at 3 times the normal rate. Entire trade routes had become too dangerous to use. The Centauri Commerce Guild's main office buzzed with activity, but it was the frantic energy of people trying to solve an impossible problem. Rixnall's forearms moved quickly between different data screens, searching for answers that did not seem to exist. Sir, his assistant entered carrying another stack of reports. The latest shipping manifests from the Outer Rim. Rixnall's eye stalks drooped as he looked at the numbers. 7 more ships lost to hyperspace anomalies. 3 cargo vessels that simply vanished between jump points. And still no explanation for why space travel had become so dangerous. What changed? He muttered to himself. It was the same question he had been asking for months. What changed 5 years ago? His assistant, a young Altarian named Kethva, cleared her throat nervously. Sir, I may have found something. The ship loss reports all mention problems with hyperspace navigation systems. Yes, I know that, Rixnall said impatiently. But those systems have worked perfectly for decades. Why are they failing now? That's what I tried to figure out. I went back through the old maintenance records. Kethva held up a data pad. Sir, Human technicians maintained 78% of all deep space navigation equipment. Rixnall's eye stalks snapped upright. Humans? But they're just Class 3 primitives. How could they be responsible for maintaining our navigation systems? I don't know, sir, but the maintenance schedules show human teams visiting every major space station and trade route beacon. They updated software, replaced parts, and calibrated the equipment. The last maintenance cycle was completed just before they left. Before they left. Nobody talked about the human withdrawal directly anymore. It was too embarrassing. The Great Galactic Council had been abandoned by a species they considered primitive. How long can navigation equipment function without maintenance? Rixnall asked quietly. Kethva consulted her datapad. According to the specifications, most systems need major maintenance every 3 to 5 years. 5 years. Rixnall felt his breathing sacs contract. The humans had been gone for exactly 5 years. On Vega Prime, healer Zixath watched another patient die and felt her faith in medicine crumble. The plague had been spreading for months now, killing thousands of her people. The worst part was that she knew a cure existed. Humans had developed it 20 years ago when a similar disease struck the Rigel colonies. The treatment was simple and effective. Zixath had even watched human doctors use it, but the research data had been stored in human-controlled databases, and those databases had gone dark when the humans left. Healer Zixath, her assistant, called from across the medical bay. "The patient in bed 7 is asking for you." Zixath walked over to find a young Vegan female, barely past her first molt. The child's breathing was labored, and her skin had the gray tinge that meant the plague was winning. "My daughter," the child's mother pleaded. "Please, there must be something you can do." Zixath had been a healer for 40 years. She had saved thousands of lives and earned respect across the galaxy. But looking at this dying child, she felt helpless. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Without the human research data, I don't know how to cure this disease." The mother's face twisted with grief and anger. "The humans? But they're primitives. How could primitives know something that you don't?" It was a good question. Zixath had been asking herself the same thing for months. How had she come to depend so completely on the knowledge of a species the Council considered backward? "I don't know," she admitted. But they did. That night, Zixath went through her old files, looking for any information about human medical practices. What she found shocked her. In case after case, when alien medicine failed, human doctors found solutions. They approached problems differently, used techniques that seemed simple but worked. More disturbing was the realization that she had never bothered to learn how humans did what they did. She had simply accepted their help when she needed it and forgotten about them when she didn't. Now children were dying because of her arrogance. War Marshal Kethmore stood in the command center and watched his defense grid fail system by system. Red lights blinked across the massive tactical display as outer rim stations went offline. The mechanical devourers were coming, and the galaxy's primary defense network was collapsing. "Status report," he barked at his aide. 17 more defense. "Platforms have gone dark in the last 6 hours," the aide replied. "We're down to 40% operational capacity." Kethmore's mandibles clicked with frustration. The Greater Galactic Defense Initiative was supposed to be the finest military network ever built. Thousands of automated defense platforms, each one equipped with the most advanced weapons technology available. It had taken 50 years and the resources of 800 species to build. Now it was falling apart. "What's causing the failures?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. The platforms simply stop responding to commands. Some of them shut down completely. Others fire at random targets." Kethmore pulled up the technical specifications for the defense platforms. The data files were enormous, filled with technical details that made his head ache. But one thing stood out clearly: primary software architecture, human design, maintenance protocols, human standard, technical support, Earth Engineering Corps. "Get me the engineering department," he ordered. 10. Minutes later, Chief Engineer Yolthar appeared on the communication screen. The elderly Altarian looked exhausted. "Marshal, I've been expecting your call," Yolthar said before Kethmore could speak. "The defense grid is failing because we don't understand how it works." "What do you mean we don't understand it? We built it." "No, Marshal. We paid for it. The humans designed it, programmed it, and maintained it. The technical manuals are written in human languages and use human engineering concepts. Most of our engineers can't even read them properly." Kethmore felt a chill run through his body. "Are you telling me that our entire defense network depends on human technology? Not just the defense network. The communication systems, the power grids, the environmental controls on space stations. Humans designed or improved most of the critical infrastructure in the galaxy. We never noticed because they made everything work so smoothly." The implications hit Kethmore like a physical blow. The galaxy's military defense depended on a species that the Council had classified as primitive, a species that had been driven away by their own arrogance. "How long before complete system failure?" he asked quietly. "At the current rate?" 6 months, maybe less. 6 months before the Devourers reached the core worlds. 6 months before 8 centuries of galactic civilization came to an end. In the Galactic Council chambers, the mood was dark. Representatives from hundreds of species argued, blamed each other, and searched desperately for solutions that did not exist. President Veltar's crystalline form had lost its usual brilliant glow. The stress of the past 5 years had taken its toll even on his energy-based physiology. "The situation continues to deteriorate," he announced to the assembled delegates. "Trade is down 70%. Medical emergencies are becoming common. Our defense grid is failing." A Denari representative stood up, his feathers ruffled with agitation. "This is all because of the humans. They sabotaged our systems before they left." "There is no evidence of sabotage," Veltar replied wearily. "The investigation teams found no signs of deliberate damage." "Then why is everything failing?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. Everyone knew the answer, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. Finally, an elderly Altarian delegate spoke up. "Because the humans were not primitives." The words hung in the air like an accusation. "They were Class 3, the Denari protested. "The classification system clearly shows they lack advanced technology." "The classification system measures technology," the Altarian continued. "It does not measure competence. The humans may have had simpler tools, but they knew how to use them better than we knew how to use ours." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some delegates nodded reluctantly. Others shook their heads in denial. "Are you suggesting," Veltar asked carefully, "that humanity was more advanced than we believed?" "I am suggesting that we never bothered to find out. We saw their technology was simpler than ours and assumed they were inferior. We never asked whether simple tools in skilled hands might be more effective than complex tools in ignorant hands." The truth was spreading through the galaxy like a plague. Humanity had not been the junior partner in galactic civilization. They had been the foundation that held everything together, and now that foundation was gone. Ships drifted dead in space because nobody knew how to maintain their navigation systems. Plagues spread because human medical knowledge was locked away. Defense platforms shut down because alien engineers could not understand human programming. The galaxy was learning what they had lost when humanity walked away. But they were learning too late. In the growing darkness between the stars, the Devourers sensed weakness and began to move toward the core worlds. Behind them, they left empty systems and the wreckage of civilizations that had thought themselves too advanced to need help. Explorer Themas had seen many strange things in his long career, but nothing had prepared him for this. His ship, the Deep Seeker, hung in space at the edge of what used to be human territory. Before him stretched something that should not exist. Wall. Not a physical barrier made of metal or stone, but something far more impossible. Space itself seemed to end here, replaced by a shimmering surface that reflected stars like a mirror. The barrier stretched in every direction as far as his sensors could reach. "Computer, run another scan," Thymus ordered. though he knew the results would be the same. Scan complete. The barrier extends in a perfect sphere around all formerly human-controlled space. Diameter, approximately 50 light-years. Composition, unknown. Energy signature, undetectable. 50 light-years. The humans had controlled a relatively small portion of the galaxy, just a few dozen star systems. Now those systems were hidden behind a wall that his most advanced sensors could not penetrate. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "I'm detecting other ships approaching our position." Thymus looked at his tactical display. Ships from dozens of different species were converging on the barrier. Altarian science vessels, Denari exploration craft, even a few vegan military ships. Everyone wanted to see the impossible wall that humanity had built around itself. "This is Explorer Themas of the Galactic Survey Fleet," he broadcast on the common frequency. "All vessels, maintain safe distance from the barrier. We don't know what it's capable of." Over the next few hours, more ships arrived. Soon there was a small fleet gathered at the edge of human space, all of them staring at the barrier and trying to understand what they were seeing. Captain Nexter, of the Altarian, Vessel Stardancer, was the first to try direct contact. He flew his ship slowly toward the barrier, transmitting friendship signals on all frequencies. "Attention, human vessels," he broadcast. "This is Captain Nexter of the Galactic Council Fleet. We request permission to enter human space for diplomatic talks." There was no response. The barrier remained silent and impenetrable. Nexter moved closer. When his ship was only a few hundred meters from the shimmering surface, something strange happened. The barrier began to pulse with soft light, as if it was analyzing his ship. "All systems showing green," his engineer reported. "No hostile activity detected." Nexter pushed forward until his ship's nose almost touched the barrier. That was when everything changed. A wave of energy swept through his ship. Not destructive energy, but something else. Something that felt like being examined by an incredibly intelligent mind. Every system on his ship was scanned, analyzed, and cataloged in seconds. Then the barrier pushed back, not violently but firmly, like an invisible hand gently moving his ship away from the wall. Nexter tried to advance again, but the barrier would not let him pass. "Fascinating," Thymus muttered as he watched the exchange. "The barrier is not just keeping us out. It's studying us." Over the following weeks, every species tried to breach the barrier. The Denari brought their most powerful weapons and fired at full strength. The energy beams simply vanished when they hit the shimmering surface, as if they had never existed. The vegans tried to tunnel under the barrier by approaching from below the galactic plane. They found that the barrier extended in all directions, forming a perfect sphere around human space. The Altarians attempted to communicate using quantum entanglement communicators. The devices worked normally until they tried to transmit through the barrier. Then they simply stopped functioning. Nothing worked. The barrier was absolute. Inside human space, quantum engineer Do-Hyun Park monitored the alien attempts to break through their defenses. He sat in a control room that would have seemed like magic to the aliens outside. The walls were made of materials that bent light and space itself. Displays showed information in ways that human minds could barely comprehend. Another probe attempt. "From the vegan fleet," his assistant reported. "They're trying to use dimensional phase technology." Do-Hyun smiled. "Let them try. The barrier exists in 17 different dimensions simultaneously. Their probe technology can only access 3. He was Hyun-Woo Park's nephew, and he had been part of the team that designed the barrier. It had taken them 3 years to build, using technology that made their pre-withdrawal science look primitive. The humans had not been idle during their isolation. Free from the constant demands of maintaining alien infrastructure, they had focused on advancing their own capabilities. The results had exceeded everyone's expectations. "Sir," another technician called out, "the barrier has cataloged another alien vessel. Total count is now approaching 1,000 different ship designs." "Good," Do-Hyun replied. "The more we learn about their current capabilities, the better prepared we'll be." The barrier was not just a wall. It was a massive intelligence gathering system analyzing every ship, every weapon, every piece of technology that the aliens brought to their doorstep. By the time the siege ended, humanity would know more about galactic military capabilities than the aliens knew themselves. Admiral So-Young Kim stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the construction yards through the transparent, aluminum windows. What she saw would have been impossible 5 years ago. Ships hung in space like jewels, their hulls made from materials that seemed to capture and hold starlight. These were not the crude metal vessels that humanity had built before the withdrawal. These ships looked alive, organic, as if they had been grown rather than constructed. "Status report on the new fleet," she ordered. 67 vessels completed, Admiral," her aide replied. "All equipped with dimensional drive systems and barrier technology. Another 30 ships are in final construction phases." So-Young nodded. The new human fleet represented a quantum leap in technology. Each ship could phase in and out of normal space, making them nearly impossible to track or target. Their weapons could strike through multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their shields could deflect any known form of energy. Most importantly, they were completely independent. Unlike the old ships that required constant maintenance and supply runs, these vessels could operate for decades without external support. "And the research stations?" she asked. "Dr. Woo-Jin Lee reports that the Dimensional Research Project is ahead of schedule. The test results are remarkable." So-Young allowed herself a small smile. Dr. Lee's team had been working on applications of the technology that created the barrier. The early results suggested possibilities that even she found hard to believe. Humanity was not just hiding behind their wall, they were preparing for something much more significant. Scientist Woo-Jin Lee stood in his laboratory and watched space fold in on itself. The experimental device in front of him was small, no larger than a human hand, but it was manipulating the fundamental structure of reality. "Computer record test results," he said. "Dimensional fold generator, test 47. Successful creation of stable spatial distortion. Duration, 12 minutes, 34 seconds. The device shut down, and space returned to normal. But for those 12 minutes, Woo-Jin had created a pocket of space that existed outside normal physics. Objects placed inside the fold could not be detected by any known scanning technology. More importantly, time moved differently inside the fold. 12 minutes of real time had passed, but the clock inside the dimensional pocket showed only 6 minutes. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Temporal differential remains consistent with theoretical predictions." His assistant, Dr. Jin-A Kim, looked up from her own workstation. "Doctor, if we can scale this technology up, we could hide entire fleets in dimensional space," Woo-Jin finished. "And they could emerge anywhere we choose, with tactical advantage of temporal displacement." The implications were staggering. Humanity was not just developing defensive technology, they were creating the tools to reshape the galaxy itself. Outside the barrier, the alien siege continued. Ships from every major species had gathered to demand answers from humanity. Some came seeking help with the plagues and system failures that were destroying their civilizations. Others came with threats and ultimatums. All of them were ignored. The barrier remained silent and impenetrable. It analyzed every ship, cataloged every weapon, and learned from every attempt to breach its defenses. But it offered no communication, no negotiation, no hope of reconciliation. Ambassador Veltar himself finally came to the barrier aboard the massive Council flagship Unity, the crystalline being broadcast on all frequencies, pleading with humanity to respond. "People of Earth," his message echoed through space. "We acknowledge that mistakes were made. The Council is prepared to discuss new terms of membership. We offer full Class 1 status and equal representation in all decisions." The barrier remained silent. "Please," Veltar continued, his voice carrying a note of desperation. "The galaxy is dying without your help. Billions of beings are suffering. Show mercy." Still no response. Explorer Themis watched the Council President's ship drift near the barrier, transmitting the same message over and over. The proud, crystalline being who had once dismissed humanity as useful primitives was now begging for their attention. "It's too late," Themis said quietly to his crew. Whatever we did to them, whatever they've become in there, they're beyond our reach now. His communications officer looked up from her station. Supreme Chancellor Othwin stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched half the galaxy burn. The tactical display showed red zones spreading like cancer across the star maps. Entire sectors had gone dark as the mechanical devourers consumed everything in their path. Status report, he ordered, though he dreaded the answer. 17 more systems have fallen in the past week, his aide reported. The outer rim is completely lost. The middle territories are under full assault. At current rate of advance, the Devourers will reach the core worlds within 6 months. 6 months until the end of galactic civilization. Othwin's tentacles trembled with exhaustion and despair. He had been Supreme Chancellor for 20 years, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this crisis. Sir, his communications officer called out. Emergency transmission from Vega Prime. The planet is requesting immediate evacuation. Their defense grid has failed. Another world about to die. Othwin closed his eyes and tried to remember how many billions of lives had already been lost. The number was too large to comprehend. Send what evacuation ships we can spare, he said quietly. But priority goes to the core world defenses. It was a death sentence for Vega Prime, and everyone on the bridge knew it. But they no longer had the resources to save everyone. They could barely save themselves. Chancellor, his tactical officer spoke up. There's something else. Long-range sensors are detecting unusual activity at the edge of human space. Human space, the barrier that had kept humanity hidden for 5 years while the galaxy fell apart around them. Othwin felt a surge of bitter anger. What kind of activity? Unknown, sir. The barrier has been fluctuating for the past 72 hours. Energy readings are off the scale. Othwin stared at the tactical display. The human barrier was marked as a small sphere of unknown territory, insignificant compared to the vast red zones where the Devourers ruled. But it was the only place in the galaxy that remained untouched by the destruction. Prepare the fleet, he said suddenly. We're going to human space. His staff looked at him in shock. Sir, the humans have ignored every attempt at communication for 5 years. They won't help us. Then we'll make them help us, Othwin replied grimly. Gather every ship we can spare, every species, every fleet. If humanity won't come to us, we'll bring the entire galaxy to them. It took 2 weeks to assemble the fleet. Ships from hundreds of dying worlds converged on the edge of human space. Proud warships that had once patrolled safe trade routes now bore the scars of desperate battles. Refugee transports carried the survivors of dead worlds. Research vessels held the last hope of species facing extinction. The fleet was massive, the largest gathering of alien vessels in galactic history. Over 10,000 ships representing every major civilization hung in space at the edge of the human barrier, and still, the barrier remained silent. Othwin stood before the fleet's combined communication array and prepared to make what might be the last diplomatic speech of his career. People of Earth, he began, his voice transmitted across all frequencies. I am Supreme Chancellor Othwin of the Galactic Council. I speak for every surviving world in our galaxy. The words felt heavy in his throat. We come to you in our darkest hour. The mechanical devourers have consumed half our territory. Billions are dead. Billions more will die unless something changes. He paused, gathering his courage for what came next. We know we wronged you. We called you primitives when you were the foundation of our civilization. We demanded tribute when we should have offered partnership. We drove you away when we needed you most. Around him, his staff watched nervously. No Supreme Chancellor had ever apologized to a Class 3 species before, but the past cannot be changed. Only the future remains. Please, show mercy to the innocent beings who had no part in our failures. Help us, and humanity will be granted full equality in the Council. Class 1 status, equal representation, equal voice in all decisions. Still no response from the barrier. If not for us, then for the children who are dying in refugee camps, for the species facing extinction, for the billions who look to the stars and see only death approaching. Othwin's voice broke slightly. Please, we're begging you. For long minutes the fleet waited in silence. Then without warning, the barrier began to dissolve. It didn't fade slowly or shut down in sections. The entire 50 light-year sphere simply ceased to exist, as if it had never been there at all. Where once there had been an impenetrable wall, now there was only empty space and distant stars. And one ship. It appeared without warning, phasing into existence as if it had stepped out of a dream. The vessel was unlike anything in the alien fleet. Its hull seemed to be made from crystallized starlight, smooth and flowing like liquid metal. It was not large compared to the massive alien battleships, but it radiated power in ways that made experienced sensors scream warnings. "Contact," the communications officer announced unnecessarily. Every sensor in the fleet was focused on the impossible ship. A communication channel opened. The voice that emerged was calm, measured, and speaking. "Perfect galactic standard. This is Fleet Admiral Taiman Han of the Human Defense Force. You have requested our attention. You have it." Othwin felt his breathing sacs contract. The voice was polite, but there was something underneath it that made his instincts scream danger. "Admiral Han," Othwin replied carefully. "Thank you for responding. As I said in our transmission, we desperately need humanity's help against the Devourer threat." "Yes," Admiral Han said simply. "We are aware of the situation." "Then you'll help us?" Othwin asked, hope rising in his chest. There was a pause before Admiral Han answered. "Tell me, Supreme Chancellor, do you remember what you said when humanity last sat in your council chambers?" Othwin's hope began to turn cold. "Admiral, that was 5 years ago. The situation has changed drastically since then." "The situation has indeed changed. Allow me to show you how much." Space behind the human ship began to ripple. Reality twisted and folded as if the universe itself was being reshaped. Then, one by one, ships began to emerge. Not ships like the aliens had ever seen. These vessels seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their forms shifting and flowing like living things. They appeared from nowhere and everywhere, as if space itself was giving birth to them. Within minutes, the human fleet numbered in the hundreds. Within an hour, there were thousands. Each ship was a masterpiece of technology that made the alien fleet look like toys built by children. 37 years we served your council." Admiral Han's voice continued as his impossible fleet took formation. 37 years we bled for your wars, healed your sick, fed your hungry, and maintained the infrastructure that held your civilization together. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, surrounding the alien fleet without seeming to move at all. One moment they were distant stars, the next they were everywhere. We asked for nothing but respect. We were content to be junior partners in galactic civilization. We believed in cooperation and mutual aid. Othwin stared at the tactical display as human vessels continued to appear. His fleet was completely surrounded by technology he could not understand. "You taught us otherwise. You classified us as primitives and demanded tribute. You made it clear that strength was the only language the galaxy understood." Admiral Han's ship moved closer to Othwin's flagship. As it approached, the alien vessel's sensors went wild. The human ship was not just advanced, it was operating on principles of physics that shouldn't exist. We learned that lesson well. "Admiral," Othwin said desperately, "whatever grievances you have with the Council, surely they pale compared to the threat of total galactic extinction. The Devourers will destroy everything if they're not stopped." "Will they?" Admiral Han asked. "Let us see." Without warning, the human fleet vanished. One moment they were there, the next they were gone as if they had never existed. Othwin's sensors showed empty space where thousands of impossible ships had been. "Sir," his tactical officer's voice was shaking. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy discharges in Devourer territory. Something is happening in the outer rim." The tactical display updated, showing real-time data from the war zone. What Othwin saw made no sense. The red zones, marking Devourer territory, were shrinking. Rapidly. "How is that possible?" he whispered. His answer came 17 minutes later when Admiral Han's voice returned to the communication channel. "The Devourer threat has been eliminated." "Eliminated?" Othwin's voice cracked. All of them? In 17 minutes? 17 minutes and 37 seconds to be precise. We wanted to make a point about efficiency. The tactical display confirmed the impossible. Every red zone on the map had turned green. Sensor readings showed the Devourer fleets were simply gone, as if they had been erased from existence. How? Othwin asked weakly. We learned many things during our isolation, Supreme Chancellor. We learned that the universe is much larger than any of us imagined. We learned that there are forms of power beyond your comprehension. Most importantly, we learned that we do not need the galaxy's approval to claim our place among the stars. The human ship began to withdraw. You may keep your counsel, Supreme Chancellor. Humanity chooses to walk alone among the stars. We will not return to those who saw us as servants. Wait, Othwin called out.